Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about Move 2 in the discussion and conclusion sections of the research article. Move 2 is framing the principal findings. And just to remind you, we had previously talked about Move 1, reestablishing the territory. Today, as I said, we're going to talk about Move 2. And then in future presentations, we'll talk about Moves 3 and 4 within the discussion section. Move 2, the framing principal findings, is one of the most frequent moves in the discussion conclusion sections. And this move is quite characteristic of the writing in discussion sections and also the combined discussion conclusion sections. But it may or may not occur in a completely separate conclusion section. So you'll have to see how these sections are really constructed within your field and within your strand of research within your field to really see how this will play out precisely for your own papers. And of course, remember that even though we're going to talk about these moves in order, we've labeled them 1, 2, 3, and 4, the moves can appear in different orders and are not necessarily linear. Move 2 has kind of an important purpose within the discussion or discussion conclusion sections because it allows the authors to really discuss the results and establish the meaning of those results based on the knowledge, the existing knowledge within their field. And this discussion and this framing can include things like the reasoning or explanations, interpretations of those results, as well as relevant deliberations, that is, considerations that go beyond the objective statement of what the results were and may go beyond the framework of the study itself. So Move 2 contains 4 steps, and some of these may not be present in a particular discussion conclusion section. So we're going to go through each step individually, and as always, as I just said with the moves, remember that even though we're going to go through the steps in a linear order, the steps can occur in all sorts of different orders in real papers and can even overlap within a single sentence, for example. What we're going to do here today, I'll discuss the general purpose of the step, look at the different types of ways we can indicate the function of that step, and then talk about what an example of that step would look like. Okay, so here is our first step, accounting for results. And the function of this step is really to reflect on the nature of your results. And this may or may not include references to previous works. So the step really functions to help clarify what may have caused your results, to suggest reasons for those results or hypotheses, for example, that could account for certain types of findings, and to justify the nature of those results. So a couple different things can happen within this reflection. So here's an example, and the authors write, thus the aromatizing activity of adipose tissue alone could theoretically account for the increased serum estrone concentration observed with androstenedione supplementation. And here I've underlined for you some language that can help really tell us that the sentence has this particular function, this accounting for results, because we can see here that the authors are saying, thus, something could theoretically account for something else. They're providing some a reason or a justification for what may have happened and what may explain their results. Okay, our next step we're going to talk about is called explicating results, and this step explains your results through interpretations or through inferences. And the purpose of this step is really to help explain these results through this interpretation or inferences, but in the context of a study or in a broader context, by making those interpretations, inferences, and you can do this either with or without reference to previous works. So we use this step to help give meaning to results, to make deductions if our results are true, what can we deduce from that, to provide some logic behind the arguments relating to the findings, and possibly also help prepare for expanding the study beyond the meaning of the simple results. So moving from the results within the scope of the study to something broader and bigger. So let's look at the example we have here. And this example states, this suggests that it may be like a rupestris, unable to establish or survive on very disturbed, more gentle terrain where very aggressive smothering weeds are common. So in this sentence, the authors are making inferences from the results. They don't actually necessarily have the answer to this, but they're saying that, this may be that the certain plant is unable to survive like another plant. So they're drawing some connections and inferring from information they have to another piece of information. Okay, let's look at our next step. And this step is called relating to expectations. And the function of this step is really to just relate the results the researchers obtained to their expectations, and to discuss and to consider the connection between these two things. And this step gets used to either point out expected results, the expectation and the results are the same, or unexpected results when these two things are dramatically different. And it also allows the authors to express their attitudes about their finding, whether they find their results to be particularly surprising, interesting, unsurprising, etc. And it also allows the authors to connect the findings back to the initial hypotheses and state whether those were or were not confirmed. So we have an example here. And it says, for the playground study, we expected that the seniors would consider more alternative solution than the freshmen, but instead observed only that the seniors who considered more alternatives earned higher quality scores. So in this sentence, you can see both what the authors had for their expectation. At the beginning, we expected that, and then also their findings. Instead, observed only that, the seniors. And we also see that they were surprised by this, but instead observed. So we get the language that helps frame that there are two different things, and that these two things were not in agreement with each other. Okay, let's look at our last step within Move 2, and this is called addressing limitations. And as the step is named, this is the place, the step that functions to point out limitations within the study. And we point out limitations, we address limitations to recognize weaknesses within the study, to avoid overgeneralization of our results to contexts they're not appropriate for, to anticipate potential criticism by other readers, and to ward off counterclaims. And also possibly to help transition to the recommendations or the implications of our work. So we have an example here, and it says, another important limitation of the study is the reliance on correlational data. And sentences that function as addressing limitations often have language that makes it quite clear that they are limitations by words like limitation, weakness, these other sorts of language that can help you recognize that the step is really functioning to limit the study or to point out potential problems within it. Okay, the next thing we're going to do, I'm going to give you sample sentences taken from real studies and ask you to identify which step you think most closely matches the sentence available. Feel free to pause your video at each step so you get a chance to really read through it and make your decision, and then I'll walk you through the answer. Okay, so here is the first step. Pause your video. All right, let's look at the sentence together. The sentence says, the restriction of these species to the quartz ridge system here is probably most easily understood in terms of the contrasting environment on such ridges compared to the original surrounding lowland mixed diparitocarp forest, where there would have been a more intense competition with a greater number of plant species. Okay, when we get through this very long sentence, we can see that there's some information here that really can help us figure out how the sentence is functioning. And that's been highlighted for you in red here. So we see in the middle it says, is probably most easily understood in terms of the contrasting environment, later on, where there would have been. So this is an example of explicating the results. The authors are making inferences about the obtained results. They're trying to draw some connections and make inferences about what might have been or what would have been the case. Okay, here's our next step. Okay, let's look at this one together as well. This one says, the exact importation of propagating material and the isolated status of the local fruit industry has probably contributed to maintaining healthy sanitary status. Okay, here we get some information that has some connection to the result. The lack of this information has probably contributed to. So we can see the authors trying to account for the results to try to draw connections for what's happened and why the results are what they are. Okay, and here's another step. All right, this step says, an obvious limitation of this study is that the experimental design relative to 360-degree feedback is a one-group pre-test, post-test design. And this is an example of addressing limitations, hopefully quite clearly. At the very beginning, the authors say an obvious limitation of the study. And that's a common way to start a sentence for addressing limitations. Although there are many other ways to accomplish this function, it's not uncommon to see words like limitation. Okay, and another sentence. This sentence says, the significantly higher serum-free testosterone concentrations observed in the androstenedione both before and during resistance training and supplementation were unexpected and difficult to explain. And here we have some information. The higher concentrations were unexpected and difficult to explain. So we have the authors relating to expectations. They're trying to see, well, what's going on here and how does this connect from the results we obtained to what we thought was going to happen. And you can see here that they were surprised by these results. Okay. The last thing for you to do here is to go look at the reading for this section and then to do your corpus exploration tasks. As we've been discussing with the discussion conclusion sections, how they look in your particular field can vary quite dramatically. So it's really important to take what we've discussed and what's in your reading and see how this works in your own field. And then there's a quiz. The quiz is to help you check your understanding, and then we'll get ready to look at moves 3 and moves 4.